I woke up in the middle of the night. I was woken up. I've had sleep paralysis once, and there was just this sensation, spiritual sensation, like something's building and something's gonna happen. I wonder if this is God. And as soon as that thought entered my mind, I felt like this energy, and it felt like getting dunked into an ice bath and electrocuted at the same time. Yeah, I'm Wayne. I'm from Texas. I grew up in Texas. I grew up in a Christian family. In fact, before I became a Christian, though we're going to kind of qualify that in a little while, I was the only person out of probably like 50 people in my family, other than one other person who wasn't a Christian. So, where some people kind of have this, didn't grow up in the faith and came to it later, like I very much did grow up in the faith. And we grew up going to church, and my parents, we prayed at dinner. And I wouldn't say that there was, my parents obviously then and now very much are seeking God, were seeking God. But we didn't really like talk about God in the sense of like talk about scripture. But we absolutely went to church for high school, went to a private Episcopal school. But that had zero effect. And it's not a knock on Episcopalians, but I just was so far off the radar from my faith in high school, but went to a Christian institution, quote unquote. And then I joined the Marine Corps after high school. And I don't know that I had any Christian friends, or maybe Sino, kind of like Rhino. Is that a thing? Sino? Christian in name only, perhaps? Um, and I guess even until probably halfway through my military career, I was a Christian in name only. But served in the Marine Corps 2009 to 2013. And then when things really started changing for me and I kind of began to take a personal internal stand on my perception of reality was when I went to college. And it wasn't because of college. I think I just became old enough to really start thinking about these things more deeply. Um, I was not interested in Christianity from about 15 till 2 years ago when I was 30. But at the same time, I was never an atheist. Like just my analysis of reality, it seemed super clear to me that this wasn't just, even just from like the laws of thermodynamics, like, hey, nothing comes from nothing. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed, only whatever, transformed or transferred. Like this isn't just an accident. Like something is definitely like holding all this together. Like the structure of reality is very much an intentional thing. So I guess I came to the understanding that I was what you would call a deist, right? Where there is a singular consciousness and there is a God. But what I absolutely did not believe and thought was ridiculous was that God was this kind of all-loving being who had a personality and made you to have a relationship with him. That was a ridiculous concept to me. And I think mostly because I couldn't understand this question of like, okay, well, if God is love and he's so good, like, why do children get sex trafficked? And, I would hear people say, like, well, it's not this in specifically, but things like everything, it's God's will. Whatever happens is God's will. And I was just like, that's stupid. Like, this is the stupidest thing. You people are dumb. Like, I didn't dislike God. I just rejected that outright. I was like, that, God can't be that way. Like, it just can't be that way. So I was just like, I don't want have anything to do with God. Like indifferent, totally indifferent. Not mad, not happy, just kind of like I just rejected the concept of God being an actor in our lives. Like there's a term for it and I can't think of it right now, but God being actively involved in reality instead of just having made it like kind of like the watchmaker idea where God made reality and cranked up the watch and now he's just the watch is just kind of ticking and doing its own thing. That's how I saw it. So yeah, I would say that's my story going up until then, and that persisted. I dropped out of college um, when I was 22 and was always interested in spirituality, quote unquote, and interested in seeking the nature of reality and truth. You know, I didn't do a very good job of it, but I was always and have always been in search of like the truth of reality because I always kind of felt like Neo in the Matrix, not insofar as I was the one, but like he always kind of had this sense like there's a reality behind reality, and what we see is kind of just like the trappings, and there's something behind it. Like that, I always very much knew that that was absolutely a thing. Um, but I never had an experience with God. In hindsight, I can point to them, but in the moment, until I was probably 30, 31, like just nothing, really nothing. Just going through life, just trying to figure stuff out on my own, you know, engineer my own destiny, all that BS, right? So that's kind of my origin story, I guess. When things started to shift for me was I was 31, and to make a long story short, I had found a way to make money, not through my job, but just generating income through, because I'm a financial advisor, and I always focused and just believe like I can generate income, but I can also use the income I make to generate investment returns myself. And that's a whole nother tangent. But I started having um, a lot of success in that after having about 5 years of just nothing but year after year failure, and it was just soul crushing. But eventually, I say, and this is true, like the reason I got good at what I do is literally just running out of mistakes to make, and finally just reaching this tipping point where now I'm making more right decisions than wrong decisions. Um, and so I just started making a good amount of money, enough money where when I was 31, I just, in the span of like 2 years, I made a, a good sum of money, not like get rich or anything, but anyway, enough where I was just like, hey, you know what? I'm going to quit my job and just kind of hang out for a while and take a sabbatical, as it were. And I just mean that in the figurative sense, obviously. And just figure out what I want and go on vacation, and maybe I can do this thing full time, and just it was kind of me just being like, I'm getting what I want, which is freedom, right? Financial freedom, not to be uber wealthy or rich or anything, but just have control over my time and just do what I want, right? Because that's what we all want, right? That's. So this was in 2022. I quit my job, and I just decided I'm just going to plan a vacation, and my plan was to drive around the country and see friends and family, because I have friends and family all around the country. And so I was kind of planning to do that. And one night, my aunt and uncle invited me out to dinner with them and one of their friends, who's also one of my friends. And we went to dinner, and then we kind of went back to their house and just like had a cocktail. And I can't exactly remember how this happened, but we started talking about God and faith, and man, before you knew it, all three of them were like witnessing to me, and I was kind of like sitting in a chair like this, and I was like, okay, this is happening. And it's happened to me before. Plenty of people have witnessed to me, many people. And the long and short end of that conversation was they were trying to convince me that God was the Christian God, right? The way that he is described in the gospel and in the Bible. And I was like, look, and this is true, never had a single issue with Christianity. Like, my entire experience with my family and just everyone I know is that Christians are great people, and Jesus is a righteous dude, like I got no beef with him. Like, who, atheist, Christian, anywhere in between, could have any issue with anything Jesus said? You can't, right? He was an awesome guy. But I was like, but that doesn't mean that I believe that God has a personality and that Jesus was God. Like, that's a whole nother thing. And another aspect of what I had always believed, just perceiving religion having been weaponized throughout history, which it has been, I would say, maybe just as somebody who lives in the West, I particularly perceive Christianity with respect to the Catholic Church. And I have no beef with the Catholic Church in and of itself, but it's the weaponization of, Martin Luther and what was it called? Crusades, and paying indulgences, right? And I'm just like, there's many things we're all aware of, right? There's everyone has skeletons in their closet. But anyway, just all the weaponization of religion, and that always made me wary. And also, even more fundamental than that, I was always very skeptical and wary of this idea of, well, if I was a consciousness and living in reality and I perceived that it's futile and that I couldn't understand why I'm here, how I got here, what I'm supposed to do, and that there's a lot of suffering, if I could make up a story or a narrative to convince myself and make me feel better and sleep at night that there is a meaning and that everything's going to be fine, I would make up the story of Jesus. It's a great story. It's almost too good of a story. And so it's probably just a narrative to, you know, suppress the disquietude of not understanding what the hell is happening here, and just to explain everything. And so I basically told them that, and it was like, hey, but I'm cool, you know. And they were like, no, it's not cool. Like, we love you and we understand what you're saying, but it's not cool. Like, you need to understand this. Like, it's true and God loves you and all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. And at one point, I'll never forget, I said, look, I would love to believe this. I really would. Like, it sounds great. It's awesome. But I don't get to choose what I believe. What I believe is what I believe. And I said, if God wants me to believe in him in that way, he's going to have to do it himself. And I didn't mean that in, I guess in a sense I was goading God, but I didn't mean it even in like a disrespectful way. It was just a matter of fact statement. Like, don't have the ability to believe this. And so something's going to have to happen in order for me to shift my perspective on this. And uh, God reminded me of that later. And so, like a month or two after that, I went on my vacation and went and drove to California and did all these different things. And I was a man of the world. I always saw myself as like a good person, and I never thought I was perfect or anything. But I had money. I wasn't working. I did what I wanted. I did drugs when I wanted to. I drank. I had sex when I wanted to. I treated people the best that I could, but like just not as good as I should. And I was living how I thought was what you're supposed to do. Be a nice person, but do what you want, right? Like, that's the American dream. Have freedom, have control of your time. Just do what feels good as long as it's not hurting other people, right? And that was the first kind of thing that piqued my perspective, was the conversation with my aunt and uncle. And I did feel something kind of arise out of that, but I quickly kind of stuffed it down. I was like, okay, whatever. But when I went on this sabbatical, on this vacation, I started having all these strange coincidences. I would meet people in random places, and I've had this happen before, but the compression of how many times this happened in a short amount of time, that just increased like exponentially. Like, I would go into like a coffee shop and someone would just start randomly talking to me about God, and I would just be like, what is happening? And I would just ignore it. And anyway, about 8 weeks into this 3-month vacation, like, I just took 3 months off, I kind of started to have this like thing pop into my brain, and just kept popping into my brain. And it was like a question. It was like, you're getting everything you want. Is it making you feel the way that you wanted it to? And I wasn't like I was having a great time. A lot of people's testimony is like, I hit rock bottom because of X, Y, or Z, and like I didn't have anywhere to turn. And that wasn't me. Like, I had gotten everything that I thought I was wanting to get, or at least I was seeing the trajectory of that becoming a reality. And at the very same time, what was being introduced into my psyche and in my heart was, okay, but project this out. Like, are you going to feel any different? And I started realizing, after ignoring that question many times, like, if I get all the money and all the things that I want, all the accolades, the credibility, the respect, the having people perceive me as someone who's successful and moral and whatever, all that crap, right? I'm gonna feel the exact same way that I did before I got any of that. And so that started to really play games in my mind, and I just ignored it for as long as I could. And I got back home like 3 months later, and one day Man, I just, for some reason, I can't remember now why, but I just sat down and I had read the Bible before. Like I said, I grew up in a Christian family, right? So I knew all the Bible stories. I'd read the Bible cover to cover before I ever became a Christian. And, but that day, I was at my parents' house because I had just moved back and I was going to move to Austin in like a month or two. So I was staying at my parents' house. They were gone. And I just sat down and started reading the gospel. And I can't remember which book I was in, but all of a sudden, in a moment, I was reading it and I thought to myself, like, oh my gosh, I think I believe this. Like, I don't know what's happening. I just kept saying to myself, even out loud to myself, like almost schizophrenically, I kept saying, something's happening to me and I don't know what it is. And it feels weird and I don't know how I feel about it. I just kept, it was weird. I just kept saying, something's happening to me. It was so odd. And so I just thought, I think I believe this. So I just ended up reading the whole gospel without stopping, which is not that long. It took whatever, 2 hours or something, 2.5 hours. Um, and I didn't know what to do. I was just kind of mind blown. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think Jesus was God. And I went to sleep that night. And uh, I woke up in the middle of the night. I was woken up in the middle of the night. And I'm in my bed. And I don't know if anyone's ever had, I've had sleep paralysis once where you wake up and like you're awake and you're like, but you can't move. And there was just this sensation, this like almost like I'm about to sneeze, but it was more like a spiritual sensation, like something's building and something's going to happen. And man, that built up for, it felt like a long time, but it was probably like 5 or 10 seconds. I woke up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. and all of a sudden this is just coming over me. And I'm just like, and I was like, there's something in the room with me and something's going on. And all of a sudden, in a moment, I thought to myself, I was like, I wonder if this is God. And as soon as that thought entered my mind, I felt like this energy just flush into my body. And it felt like getting dunked into an ice bath and electrocuted at the same time. And it was super intense. And I don't know I really don't know how to describe it other than that, but it was extremely intense. And it was such a departure from normal physical experience. Like I immediately knew that this was something different. And that lasted only like 3 to 5 seconds. But again, that felt like longer than 3 to 5 seconds. And it was super intense. It started to kind of freak me out like a lot. Like I was like, oh, am I going to die or something? And then it ended. And within another 5 seconds, I was in a deep sleep again. So from waking up to this happening to falling back to sleep might have taken 15 seconds or something. But the 15 seconds it was happening, like it was so intense. I don't know how to describe it. So the fact that I just woke up, had this happen, and fell back to sleep, it was so bizarre. And then the next morning I woke up and I felt different. And that was like every day of my life has been different since that moment. And in hindsight, it was like God like entered into my body. And the fear that I felt, it was a absolute fear, but it was like a reverent fear. It wasn't like the fear of impending doom. It was just power. It was just, I'm just thinking of Star Wars now, Palpatine, unlimited power. Yeah, exactly. It was just like getting hit by lightning. And anyway, so that's really the kind of when everything kind of, I don't know, sublimated into the beginning of my new life. So I moved to Austin and I was like, I didn't really know anybody. My cousin Madison lives in Austin and I have an aunt and uncle, or I don't even know. They're my cousins, I guess. I don't know. Whatever I call my dad's cousins or aunt, or I don't know. It's one of these 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon thing, but I call them my aunt and uncle. I love them. But I didn't really know anybody in Austin, but I knew I needed to start going to church, right? Because even though I'd always poo-pooed church, like, well, I mean, God doesn't care if you go to church or not. It's like, it's not about whether or not God cares if you go to church. It's about you being around people who are like-minded and, you having your focus on God, right? So I just wanted to go to a Bible church. So I started going to Austin Ridge, and, it's, I'm not sure doctrinally what you would call it, maybe Reformed Baptist. I really don't know. Doesn't matter. But it was exactly what I was looking for, because I wanted somebody who preached from the word for word, because I really needed to immerse myself in the word, because I understood that was important. Um, and uh, and so that's kind of the path I was taking, kind of somewhat of the again, I don't, this isn't probably the right term, but doctrinally kind of like the Baptist path of, okay, do the work, be disciplined, get in the word, change your life, right? But at the very same time over here, I had this extreme like Holy Spirit experience, right? So I'm trying to kind of, assimilate these two into some kind of comprehensive understanding of my path, and like, okay, I know God does crazy things, but also I shouldn't lean on that. I should just focus on, you know, just the blocking and tackling, as it were, of my faith. Um, but I couldn't let go of this spiritual experience I had. It was really, really intense. And furthermore, the spiritual experiences started to continue and get more intense. Like God, I would have God talk to me, and like I didn't really ever, I'd heard of that happening in people's life, but in like my family, that people never really talked about anything like that. But I just started having all these crazy, really intense experiences with God. Like I'd be driving, and all of a sudden, man, God would just be in my car, and it would be so intense that I have to like pull over, and I'd just start crying. And which is very uncomfortable for me, because I pride myself in being did pride myself being hyper rational, super logical, kind of look down in a condescending way at people who claim to have these amazing experiences with God. It's like, look, you don't have to prove anything to me. You don't have to prove how amazing God thinks you are to me, like by making up all these stories, right? That's literally how I uh, perceived people who had spiritual experiences. And I really think that's why God reached out to me in the way he did. One, because it was a humbling experience, and God was like saying, go ahead and try to rationalize this. I dare you. Yeah, that's what I thought. And two, that's really what helped me get past my skepticism, was God did make it real. It wasn't, I mean, I so envy in a good way people, Jesus talks about like, those who haven't seen a sign and believe in me, like they are whatever he says, something like, God, blessed are they. That's not me. Never has that been me. It is now, but God did have to for me. He did it for me, and he didn't have to. He I rejected him many times, but he did make it literally a physical experience for me, and I just couldn't deny it. So I'm so grateful for that. So I started watching sermons on YouTube, and I stumbled upon this guy named Bill Johnson, who is the pastor of a church, and I didn't know who this guy was. I just liked his sermons, of a church in California, and so I would watch all his sermons, and that was cool, and really enjoyed it. And then there were some times where in the stream of the YouTube channel, they would do these healing things. And I was just like, this is ridiculous. And he would stand up and be like, I just feel like somebody has an issue with their shoulder. And I'll be like, this is such nonsense. Like, I really like the way this guy preaches, but I'm not going to entertain this silliness, So I'd always skip that part. And then one time, when you get the recommendations next to the YouTube video you're watching, there was one for this guy named Randy Clark, and I'm like, well, maybe he's a good preacher too. So I click on it, and I start listening to this guy, and I'm like, this guy is totally a whack job. Like, this is dangerous. I don't want to have anything to do with this. He was saying just such ridiculous stuff. And after about 2 minutes, I just turned it off. And man, I heard a voice in my head say like, no. You need to lean into this. This is where you need to be. Like, this is another thing that you need to get over, right? And I ignored that. But maybe like a couple weeks later, I started watching another video of him, and man, it was like a healing conference or whatever. And I don't know why, but man, while I was watching it, my perspective started to shift, and where my brain was saying, no, 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 like stay away, run away from this as fast as you can. Like, these people are dangerous. Cause I grew up in that kind of perspective where, healing doesn't really, yeah, God can heal people, but the idea that that there's prophecy and healing ministry and things like that. Like that's just silliness. But in the other hand, God was telling me like, no, you need to lean into this. And I was watching this healing conference, and he said something like, if you're interested in this or like you want to experience this, right now we're doing trips to Brazil, and we're seeing some of the most amazing miracles and things that I've ever seen. And I've been to 100 countries, and I've been doing this for 40 years. And I was just like, okay. So I got on the website for the ministry and booked a trip within like a 2-day period. From the idea of like maybe I should do this to booking a trip was like 2 days. And didn't know anyone who's ever been on a trip like this, didn't know anything about it. I was thinking like, this guy's probably like a weird cult leader. I'm probably going to get down to Brazil and just sit in this room and just realize what a mistake I've made and how bizarre this is. But I just really felt like God telling me like, just go do this. And really it was also, if this is real, I got to find out. Because if it is real, I need to be a part of it. And if it's not real, then I need to be a part of being against it, So I booked a trip and I showed up, didn't know a single person there, never seen a miracle in my life, ever, other than the weird spiritual things that I've experienced, but never seen anything. Didn't know anything about how to pray for healing. Didn't know anything about anything. I bought his book and read it on the way over on the plane. It was like I still have it, like the Essential Guide to Healing or whatever. And I just cranked that thing out on the plane, and they had all these training modules you're supposed to do before you went. I didn't do any of those. There were Zoom calls. I didn't participate in any of those. I just showed up. It's super contradictory. I was all gung-ho about it. Obviously, I paid the money. I booked the trip, but at the same time, I had a very bad attitude about it. Like there was a huge part of me that's like, I'm going to be disappointed when I go, right? And it was almost like I need to go so that I can, put this silliness out of my mind. So the first night at the hotel, they have what's called an impartation. I had no idea what that is. And I start reading about it kind of in the syllabus or itinerary, and I'm like, okay, here we go. It's going to be like a big culty thing. And he walks in, and the first thing that happens is like the guy who was kind of like welcoming everyone and saying how everything was going to go down just starts making fun of him. Like, I forget about like how short he is. And I'm like, okay, well, it can't be that culty and everyone laughs, and I'm like, okay, well, it can't be that bad. Anyway, he came up and he talked. And he was just like the nicest, most humble guy. The very first thing he said is, listen, yeah, this is a healing ministry, and I believe I have the gift of healing, but I'm not the one healing. Like, I and you, we are all just kind of the mechanism and the way for God to flow healing to other people. It's not about me. Everything about this is about introducing people to Jesus. And the whole point of this healing ministry is to help people understand that Jesus is the source and the answer for everything. Like, this is evangelism. This is all it is. It's just different than what some of you have experienced. And there were basically no new people there. Almost everyone, I didn't know this until later, but this is like the OG trip. The December Brazil trip is like renowned to be the trip of trips. And so I was like the only new person there. Everyone there had been there multiple times, went to churches where there was, gifts of the Spirit. And here I am. I'm just like, yeah, I've never seen a miracle. I don't even believe necessarily that it's going to happen. And anyway, people are just like, and you just came here? And I was like, yeah. But anyway, he did impartation, so he gets everyone lined up, and he's like, we're gonna lay hands and pray for the transference of gifts from us to you by the power of God, and if we have a word of knowledge for you. I heard these terms by reading it in the book 12 hours prior on the plane over, right? I'm just like, this is all ridiculous. Anyway, he starts laying his hands on people. And man, they start like falling out and stuff. And again, I'm still holding on to this cynicism where I'm just like, these people are faking it, And I'm like, nothing's going to happen when he touches me. This is BS. I'm not falling over. So he comes by me and puts his hands on me, and sure enough, nothing happened, right? Like, and it didn't happen to everyone, but like people on this side of me, and then he passed me and people on this side of me. Some of them like fall down and have these crazy experiences. They're acting crazy and nothing happens to me. So that's just reinforcing, my thought. Well, this is stupid, right? But at the same time, I'm like, okay, but I'm here, right? I'm not gonna leave. I want to see what happens. The next day is when the ministry starts, and it's an afternoon and an evening session, and it's at basically like a collective rec facility where multiple churches kind of have banded together and purchased this communal property that they use for conferences or what have you. And I walk in there, and it's like a Tuesday on a work day, and it's 1 p.m. and there's like 3,000 people in the room or 2,000 people. I'm like, whoa. I also we split up into different groups, but I somehow got paired up with Randy every day, almost maybe every day but one day. So like I was with that guy the whole time, and he would preach the sermon and then talk about healing and the purpose of healing and kind of how it works and build up everyone's faith. And then it was very much about training lay people or just random people to also engage in healing and have them be used for healing to heal people. And so we would get up in a line, and people would give words of knowledge, and like the person I sat next to would go up there and be like, God, I really feel like God telling me that someone has cancer in their lymph node, and I'm just like, this is so crazy. And then okay, whoever that was, everybody come get up, and you line up in front of that person, and that person's going to pray for you. So like the word of knowledge would correspond, that person would pray correspondingly to the person who had that condition or that issue, whether it be emotional, physical, spiritual, what have you. And then also people like me who didn't get a single word of knowledge. It's like, okay, you come up and then you can just pray for anyone and everyone whoever comes up. From the first session, we did an afternoon and night session every day. I saw some crazy, weird stuff happening. And I'm like, is this like orchestrated? Are these people, is there like some kind of collusion going on? Because like this lady would come up, like one day, this lady came up and somebody prayed for her son, and then he started talking, and and I'm kind of seeing this. They're speaking in Portuguese, and I'm kind of watching in my peripherals. And he starts talking, and the whole family's there, and they start going ballistic. They start going crazy, and I'm like, what just happened over there? And so I find out later, he'd been mute for like 7 months, hadn't spoken a word. And he's like 8 years old, so it's not like he's too young to talk or anything. And he hadn't said a word, wasn't able to speak a word. And this lady, random lady from like Omaha or whatever, not some kind of whatever preacher or something, just prayed for him, and then he could speak, and he was fine. And I'm like, honestly, what entered my head is, well, this is all kind of a ruse, right? Like they came up, and this is all, I was supposed to see it, and they talked about this before. And it's not that I necessarily believe that, but like that's kind of what I'm going to in my head. But as time went by every day, the chaotic interconnection of these happenings, it became super clear to me that there's no way anyone could plan all this. Like this was happening, and I was seeing crazy things happening. Like people were, deaf people were starting to hear, and people would come back after a few days, and they had been praying about having metal in their body from surgery, and they would go get an x-ray and come back, and the metal was gone. And people who couldn't walk right, like they for 15 years because of a fall, like they would get healed and walk around, and it was just amazing. It was so amazing. And anyway, this is all building up to the very last night, the very last day. We did another impartation where Randy invited the Portuguese pastor, and he had known this pastor, had gone to Brazil like 100 times. He met this pastor originally in the year 2000, and the guy had a church that wasn't having a lot of success, had like 40 members. And Randy, that guy came up and asked for prayer from Randy. And Randy had a word for him and prayed for him. And it changed this Portuguese pastor's life. And that was 20 years prior. Fast forward to now, or 2023 when I went, this guy has like oversees like 8 different churches, and there's like a collective 40,000 members in only 20 years. Um, and it's just an amazing testimony and story. And Randy invited this gentleman to come to the impartation session, which was at this like hotel where we eat lunch, and this is the middle of the day. And so we all line up again, and I'm kind of like in the third row, and Randy's there, and then Pastor Joel, super cool guy. And before they started this, he and his wife gave like an hour-long talk about their testimony, how they met Randy, the crazy things that happened in their church. And it's the most insane thing you've ever heard. Like you could not believe it was real unless you experience these things yourself. They're just beyond bizarre, like Old Testament stuff, like truly not just miraculous things, bizarre miraculous things. One thing I remember is like they would have these kind of confabs in the woods where they would go to this, I guess what we would think of maybe as like a state park or something, and they'd have these kind of like campouts, and they'd have these sessions where they would just pray and just invite, gifts of the Spirit and pray for healing for each other. And he said that they would have to, the Spirit of God would get so intense that they would all gather around the fire and like lock arms, because people would get so overcome with the Spirit that like somebody would like break off and just like run off into the woods, and they wouldn't see him until the next morning, and they would just be like strewn about the place, in the woods, and like they'd be like, no, don't go, don't go. And then somebody would break off. And he just said in his churches after a while, the moving of the Spirit became so intense that he actually had to pray that God would pump the brakes on it. He was like, I just can't handle it anymore, because they would have these church services, and he'd be like, I'm not even gonna invite the Spirit per se today or do healings. I'm just gonna preach on 1 Samuel, just like normal church stuff. And he would be like, Holy Spirit, just for today, can we just have like a normal church service? Whereas it's so the opposite here, right? It's like, man, we're just desperate for more power, more manifestations of the Holy Spirit. And he's just begging for the opposite because it's just so intense. And he said he would just start preaching, and people would just start falling over and just passing out. And he said he'd be preaching, and there'd be, an hour later he'd be done, and there'd be like 30 people on the ground, and they wouldn't get up. He said he'd have to wait until like 2 or 3 in the morning every day, every time, for these people to like come out of it. Or he eventually he had people fill out like a contact card of like, not next of kin, but like, put a phone number down of somebody who could come pick you up if you're still like laid out by the time it's midnight. And he said all the time he'd have to do that. So he did that. He and his wife did like an hour of testimony of their story, and then the impartation happened. And man, after hearing an hour of that, and whereas in the last impartation, I was like, I don't want any part of this. I was like, I'm getting my portion today. Like, I'm here for it. I've seen all this crazy stuff. Like, this is real. I want it. I insist on it. Like, I demand it, like I'm here for this. And I could just kind of, I don't know. Again, there's sometimes where people, I'm assuming it's this way with other people. It's just kind of like, when people say how it feels when lightning's going to strike, like this static potential energy, like I could just kind of feel something building. And I was like, something's going to happen, and you start kind of like getting goosebumps and you get excited. And anyway, they come over to me, and Randy prays for me first, and I kind of start feeling some stuff. And I'm just trying to not use my ego and my whatever you want to call it to reject it. I'm just like, let's do this, And I start kind of feeling strange, And again, I'm so against making this psychosomatic now and before. I'm like, I'm not doing it unless it's real. I'm not going to be one of these people who just pretends like something's happening. I was just offended is probably the right word. I was so offended by it. So I'm like, I'm not doing it unless it's real. And Randy puts his hand on me, starts praying for me, and just talking about, like they use terms like, God fall upon this person, like more God, fresh fire, stuff like that. Weird stuff that sounded super creepy to me at first. And I start feeling weird, right? And then he kind of does that for a few seconds and then passes me. And then the Portuguese pastor puts his hand on my head. And the second he does, like I just collapsed. And I had this experience where it was similar to me talking about getting woken up. It was that feeling of like the freezing cold ice, but I wasn't cold, but just kind of like the, in the electricity. But this time it was amplified to the nth degree. And I just felt, and again, this is a term I think maybe Charles Finney used, liquid love. Like I felt that. I just felt like this intense, pure pleasure of love. And I just started laughing. And man, I started laughing like deep belly laughs. I'm on the ground and I'm like this, and I'm wearing, for like conferences, you have like when you go to like a conference, you have the card with your picture on it. So I had one of these on and I fall over and I'm experiencing all this, and I accidentally like got my arm kind of under it, and I'm like this, and I'm like, it's when you're being electrocuted, like you're all like that. And I'm flexing so hard and I'm not under any control with any of this. And I flexed so hard that I just snapped the lanyard. I broke it totally on accident. It just broke and it came off. And I just was laughing, deep belly laughs. And I just couldn't stop laughing. And I was laughing harder and harder and harder. And then when stuff like this happens, it can be contagious. It's really weird. We get the movement of the spirit is so bizarre. And if you're not open to it, it'll weird you out, because it is weird. It's the weirdest of weird, but it's the most beautiful weird thing you've ever seen. But I'm laughing, and we're all laying on the ground, like 40 people, we're all laid out. Like there's not a single person that wasn't laid out. And guarantee you, there was not a single person in there faking. I'm telling you. I was very much looking for the faking. There was none of it. And I bump into this lady next to me and I'm laughing, and then she starts laughing. And then like in my immediate kind of proximal circle, we're all just laughing, and we're just laughing so hard, and I can't stop laughing, and it's not like a weird laugh. It's just like the most pure laughter of joy. And I'm just experiencing this just, I don't know. You can't experience it. It's overwhelming. I don't know how else to explain it. And about this time, they had gone to the next row behind me, and they're coming this way behind me, and I'm on the ground, and I'm like, I can open my eyes and kind of look around, but I can't move. I'm like, oh, and they're kind of getting up close to me, and I just think to myself, like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm gonna get another dose of this. Like I'm getting the full portion of this. So I'm keyed on to the Portuguese pastor, because he's the one that really like knocked me down. So he walks by, and I like reach out and I grab his ankle, and he's not paying attention to me. He's like praying for someone else, but I'm just like, I don't care what's happening. So I grab his ankle, and he is like standing up, and he goes like this. And then he looks down at me, and he just kind of smiles and starts laughing at me. And then he just puts his hand right on my head. And I'll never forget, he's just like smiling at me. And I don't know what he said, because it was in Portuguese, but it doesn't matter. He said something to me, and man, it just like turned up to 11. And it was just unbelievable. It was the greatest day of my life. There's no question about it. It was just amazing. And there's some people are laughing, some people are crying, some people are just like shaking, like just going like, oh, but just smile on their face. One guy was literally over in the corner, and he was like uncontrollably like roaring like a lion. And it was weird. It was so weird. And I know for people even Christians who never experienced something like this, not only does this sound silly or ridiculous, but there was a definite multiple times where I'm like, is this like demonic? You know, because like this seems super undignified. Like, surely God isn't, wouldn't want people to be this way. And what I heard a voice in my head at that moment and many times over, and it was drilled into my head. It was like, this is about abandoning your understanding of dignity and just accepting the Holy Spirit. And one thing that Randy said on the first day was like, when you're looking around and experiencing all these things and seeing things happen, the question you ask yourself is, what's the fruit of this? Because everything shall be known by its fruit, right? And so I was experiencing these things one day, and I just thought, man, is this like demonic? This could be bad. Like might have made a big mistake. And I heard God say, God often speaks to me in like questions, right? I don't know about other people, but he's like, well, Wayne, what's going on here? And I'm like, all this crazy stuff. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, well, what's the result of it? I'm like, everyone's just praising Jesus. That's the only thing that's like the terminus of all of this. The preaching, the evangelism, the the manifestation of the Spirit, the healings, everyone's just saying, praise God, praise Jesus. And so God literally said, right, so what exactly is the problem then? That's exactly what he said to me. What's the problem? And I was like, I guess nothing. And he was like, that's right, nothing. Like, just open yourself up to this. Like, this is, I'm trying to do something here, and I need you to, if you want to be a part of it, I want that, but I can't make you. You got to invite me in to be a part of you and this whole thing. And I was like, okay. So that's where things changed. Anyway, that's kind of how that story ended. And then the last thing I'll say is that was the last day. The last night session was the craziest thing I've ever seen. I saw a man get healed of blindness. And when I say I saw it, I mean, we walked in that night, and I'd seen this guy a few times that week. He sits right at the door as you go in, like right at the threshold of this church. And he was clearly blind, one, because he was walking around like a blind guy, right? And people had to help him everywhere. And he was probably like 50 or something. Two, his eyes were like bloodshot and milky. And I don't know what his condition was, but and he was just clearly blind. And three, he was the blind guy. He's been coming to these things for like 15 years. Everybody knows him. I don't remember his name, but he was the blind guy. And I don't mean like he couldn't see well. I mean 100% blind. Uh, they said he was blind from birth, right? And throughout the course of that night, I had made friends with these two Dutch guys who have a healing ministry in the Netherlands, and they come on this trip. And one of them was dying of cancer and terminal cancer in the hospital. And God, like, he had an experience where God came into his hospital room and healed him of terminal cancer. And so he started a healing ministry. Anyway, and I look over and he is praying for this guy, and he's sweating. The guy is sweating, and he's praying for him for like 15 minutes, just getting after it. And all of a sudden, I look over, and they're both just going like this. And the guy is screaming. And then there's all these people like holding a phone in front of the blind guy's face. And I run over and I go, what happened? And he just looks at me and he goes, I've been praying for somebody to get healed of blindness for 10 years, and it finally happened. Of course, he's screaming this and he's like crying. I'm kind of communicating it in a more subdued way, and I look over and somebody is somebody's getting the blind guy to read, and he can read, right? Or no, what was it? It was a picture, whatever it was. It was like, can you see this and tell me what it is? And he could see. And he was blind, and now he could see. And that was like the moment where it all kind of came together for me. And I was like, wow, this is totally, totally real. And it's amazing. And it just blew my mind, because I had gone from this in a year from not believing to believing to kind of being a Pharisee in a way. Like, oh, I'm just going to do the work. Like, I'm going to make myself good, and I'm going to stick to kind of what I know and what I can, you know, tangibly understand. And God introduced this aspect of just surrendering to the power of God and just letting it into your life, and just booking this trip, and being skeptical, downright offended by the idea, to it just in this short period of time, just experiencing all this and just having my life just so radically changed. Just radical is an understatement, you know? And another thing that happened shortly after I decided to read the gospel and had that experience where I got woken up in the middle of the night, something that happened a few days later, like I was totally changed. There's no question about it. But another thing that happened a few days later is I was sitting on a couch, just kind of in silence, just thinking. I was doing a lot of thinking then. And I mean, I guess I always am, but this was kind of like drinking through a fire hose, as it were. And I started having, I don't know if you want to call it a vision, because like I've never had what people call an open vision, right? But it was like a daydream that I didn't control. I'm not sure if that's the right way to describe it, but I don't really know how else to describe it. But I'm sitting on a couch and I start thinking about just this idea that I had spent my adult years trying to engineer my destiny. And I don't even mean that in like a new agey way, but like, okay, I don't know what the meaning of life is, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So the only thing I know to do is to just create it for myself. Like, I have a consciousness. I do know that consciousness is powerful, and I did know no one's going to do it for me. I have to create meaning, right? So I'm going to do the best that I can to manifest the reality that I want. And I had the best of intentions. I really did, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Man, that's such a true statement, and I understand it more now than I ever did. When Eve looked at the tree, the Bible says she saw that it was good to eat. So what's good is not always what you should be focused on. I'm thinking about that, but then now I have this experience with God, and my life's changing, and I'm basically in a statement. I'm believing that Jesus is God, right? Which is really the focal point of that's the whole thing. And I started having kind of this vision, and I don't know if you've ever been to SeaWorld or Six Flags or whatever, but or wherever you go, New Orleans, you can get these caricatures drawn of you, where it's like you have like an elongated skull and they over accentuate your features and it's funny. And when they show you, we went somewhere and we had one of me and my sister. I can't remember where we were, but we still have it in our house. And it's you. It's my sister Maggie. You can tell that it's Maggie, and me, Wayne. You can tell that it's Wayne. But it's a clownish version of yourself, right? It's silly. It's relegated. It's it's a joke, and it's supposed to be. And so for some reason, I had this, like, I started having this vision, and I'm sitting in a chair, and someone's doing a caricature of me, right? And this is very real. It's more than just like a daydream. It was very strange. And the person turns it around and shows it to me, and it's a caricature, right? And the person who was God says, this is you. This is what you've been doing. This is you. This is when you create the picture of who you are, when you engineer your identity, when you create your identity, when you try and formulate your destiny and control everything. This is the best it's ever going to be, the picture of you. No one would confuse this for anyone but you, but it's a clownish version of you. It's kind of pathetic. It's not the real you. It's not the you were supposed to become. And if you continue in your life insisting on formulating your own identity and declaring your own identity, this is all you'll ever be. This is the best version of yourself that you'll ever be able to create. But then he kind of showed me over here, it's like, but if you unify with me and surrender to me, I will create a portrait of who you really are, because I created you. I know who you are. And if you lean into that and you come with me on this journey, I will create a portrait of you more beautiful than anything you could ever imagine. But you'll never be that without me, because I am like the source and the fundamental seat of identity. I seed identity to you. You do not ever create it yourself. And it was like, Wayne, that's been your problem. He was like saying to me, like, I've always been pleased with the fact that you're searching, but you've been missing it. You're not getting it. You've been trying to do this, and you haven't been understanding that all you've been doing is this. You've just feedback looped back to yourself every time. And that's why it hasn't worked for you. Like, you need to be righteous, right? We think of righteousness as doing the right thing and being good or whatever, and it is all those things, but it's like an arrow is fired straight and true, right? Like, righteousness is about like having a direction and a magnitude and aspiring to the right thing, right? And God was like just telling me, you've been missing it, but it's so simple. All you need is me. Like, just come with me, and I'll show you your identity. I'll show you who you are, and you'll understand that it's the true version. And man, that was such a bizarre thing, because that was kind of the surrender moment. Like, I had the belief moment and I had the spiritual filling moment, but it was really like the call to action was really about identity. Like, I have a plan for you. I know who you are. You can do amazing things, but it's got to be with me. Like, there's nothing correct outside of me. And that was a really cool experience. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, I give up. Like, I'm not gonna, I can't fight this anymore. Like, it's been made, in a moment, like all of my apprehensions, all of my, my, gosh, what's the word I should use? All of my BS reasons to not do it. It just fell away, and there was just nothing else. And I was like, okay, you win. That's it. You win. Um, so yeah, that was cool too. There's an Alan, you know who Alan Watts is?
Yeah, I've listened to countless.
I still think he's great, Christian or not. He's an interesting dude. Yeah. He's got a quote, and I heard this years ago, years before I ever became a Christian. It always stuck with me, but it especially is relevant to me now. He said, the Godhead can never be an object of its own knowledge. Um, and he says something like, fire cannot burn itself and light cannot illuminate itself. So it's impossible for you to understand who you are, because you can't ever properly perceive yourself because you're inside of yourself. So when you make yourself God, you're never going to be able to be an object of your own knowledge. You're never going to be able to understand who you are. So only an outside force can truly see who you are. That's how and why God has a split personality order, not disorder, because God needs to reference his own identity amongst the other personalities. That's how he gets a full. How do you figure out where you are on a map? What do you need? You need to triangulate your position. Otherwise, you have no orientation. So you need 3 points of contact in order to understand where you are, and in consciousness who you are. That's why God has 3 persons, so that he can confer amongst himself, amongst themselves, himself, however that works. And that's why he knows who he is, and he's perfect. And that's why I'm not. Because I'm like somebody walking through a forest, and I have a map, but I have no way to even use the map to understand where I am, because I only have one point of reference, and it's futile. That's why life is totally futile without God. There's no way for you to understand what's going on. It's impossible. So yeah, that's exactly why God has 3 persons. That's why reality is 3-dimensional. It makes perfect sense. For people who are like me, who, and I still am in my flesh, all these things, there's no question, have a propensity to be self-righteous or arrogant or conduct self-worship or lean on my perceived intellect or lack thereof. Um, and just, there's a good aspect of I'm going to be self-sufficient. Everyone understands that that's a good trait, but it can delve quickly into self-worship if you're not careful. Um, forget about what you think you know. Forget about your insistence of understanding things. It's, you need to forget about the idea that you can even do that. You're not equipped. You're not engineered to do that. You're engineered to be a cohesive unit with something greater than yourself. And if and all you have to do is accept that. It's there. It's free for you. But so long as you insist on doing things as a one-man show, like you're gonna feel alone because you are alone, and it's not gonna work. It's just not gonna work, and everybody understands this whether they want to admit it or not. Everyone has this kind of thing in the back of their mind, like, this isn't working. I'm trying my best, I'm putting my best foot forward, and it's just not working. So forget about the first thing that God told me was, Wayne, you need to get over this insistence that you need to understand everything and categorize it and put it in its nice little box over here, kind of like the term they use for categorizing the animal, like taxonomy. Like, okay, this animal fits with these other animals, and so we've got that tied up into a nice bow, and this goes over here, and everything's in its right place, and I understand everything, and there's no unanswered questions, and there's no unanswered variables. It's a childish perspective. It's a fool's game, and you cannot do it. And if you will do that, it's a road to perdition. It will not yield fruit for you. Surrendering to the idea that you don't know, you can't know, and that you don't know what you want, and you can't get what you want. But it's okay because there is somebody who does. You know, um, for people like me, I know you asked about people who are quote unquote so-called Christians. But for me, that was my hangup. It's just getting over myself and just like, you don't have to figure it out. It's okay. Like, God is there. He'll figure it out. Like, all you just hitch to his wagon. Like, why would I pull the wagon when I can just get on the wagon and have somebody else pull it for me and just be part of it. That would be my message. Just don't feel like you need to understand everything. It's okay to not understand. Like, just get over yourself. Really, until recently, told people I became a Christian too, and that was September of 2022. So whatever that is, God's really reminded me, like, no, you became a Christian when you were 15, remember? And it does bring me back to, I went to this Christian camp called Pine Cove for years, summer camp, a week every year in the summer, and it was amazing. And I did give my life to God then. I was saved then, but after like 2 months, I just totally forgot about it. I just totally turned my back on God. Not like as in I intentionally started doing bad things or anything, but I just totally forgot about it. But God reminded me, like, no, you got saved then. And it makes a lot of sense now why I had, conviction about things, or man, things turned out better in my life than I deserved them to, or avoided dying or whatever. That's a whole nother can of worms. But I did not have a relationship with God at all. Period. No relationship. None. Because I didn't believe that there was a relationship to be had. I did not believe that God had a personality. I believed that God was some kind of grand consciousness. It's kind of devoid of, I mean, I keep using that word, but there's no other word, personality. Like, he's a person, right? When I say he's a person, people are like, what do you mean? Like, he was a human being? Like, no, a person is just somebody who has a person, is just an entity with a personality, with awareness and self-awareness, and like that I just never had that. I never believed that. And the moment that idea entered into my mind, it was like, I don't know. It just came, God just came alive, in my life. And now, whereas I used to ridicule people for this, now I just talk to God like you and I are talking right now. And I mean that very literally. Like, God speaks to me, not in an audible voice. I'd love for that to happen, and I think that has happened to people, but it hasn't happened to me yet. But God speaks to me in my head. Like, I'll have a conversation with God. A full sentence sometimes. Lots of times it's a question, but man, You don't have to perceive God as this father who is very strict and overly formal, and like you have to approach him and be like have these protocols, and like he's your dad, he's your friend. Like he's, yes, you worship him and he is holy and you must fear him and all these things, but like it says, Paul says Abba Father. Like that word Abba is, I think it's an Arabic word that means something like he's your dad, he's your daddy. Like he just hang out with him. Like, hey, what's up? Hey man, love you. Like you. It doesn't have to be this hyper structured relationship. Like, man, you can talk to God and He can talk to you, and you can hear from Him just like you hear from anyone else. And that's a huge thing I want to communicate to people, because I don't think most Christians really believe that. I think they would kind of say they believe that and provide lip service, but um, man, people are like, man, God just doesn't talk to me. And it's like, you're not listening. And I know because I've been there. This is not an indictment on anyone. I was the pinnacle of God does not talk to people, you idiot. Stop pretending like you have some kind of special relationship with the creator of the universe. But we all do. That's exactly what we have. We're all his favored children. So, yes, God does just talk to you. Yes, you should ask God things and expect to hear. Like, you can have that every day. That doesn't mean you can just control it every single time, but like it's there for you. That's why Christ said, my sheep know my voice. And if you ask for anything in my name, you shall receive it. There's so much controversy on exactly what that means. And we're not even going to get into that. But I can guarantee you it does mean that God speaks to you, and God would never insist that you follow his will and then make it damn near impossible for you to know what that is. That's not how that works. So, man, just get over your thinking that you need to understand everything and everything needs to be, A plus B equals C. Like A plus B equals God. A plus B equals, man, just be open to things. And you're going to fail and you're going to err, but man, it's so much about, I'm not a religious person. I despise religion. I'm not, Christianity to me is not a religion. It's just simply a relationship with the source of life, and that's God. And we all get that, and we all get it in different ways and in different experiences, but we all get it to the same degree. Whether you're whatever, whoever, a 5-year-old in Sunday school, or you're, you know, think of the greatest, most impressive person of the faith in your life or in history. It's all, you're both the same to God. He's no respecter of persons. So people should not relegate themselves to, I wish God could work in my life like he works in that person's life. Like, no, that's wrong. God is a master craftsman, which means that you are a master craft. You are artificed in a perfect way. Like, you're the only thing made in his image, which means you are the centerpiece of reality. Everything else in reality was constructed to operate in accordance with you and what you do. So people should not relegate themselves to, well, I just kind of do my best, and yeah, I wish I could do that. I wish God would work in my life that way. He's probably not, because you probably don't believe that he can. And to some extent, to a great extent, we can, and this is going to be a controversial statement, but we can limit God by the degree to which we allow him into our reality or not. God will give you what you want. God will give you what you want. And I don't want people to take that statement too far one way or the other, but you shall have what you say. So